Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Everybody's Got a Podcast. This is going to be episode number 20. So, today's episode is going to be a bit different. Normally, I just kind of pontificate. I just kind of think about some sort of topic that I've come up with, and I'll write a few questions to kind of help get myself through the episode in an organized fashion. But today, I thought I would go with something a bit different. This one's going to be more like a blog. It's an opinion piece. Now, I've written quite a bit for this one. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be long, it just means that I've decided to really articulate my thoughts before I go into the episode, rather than just simply thinking about it. Not as I go, but a lot of the episodes are, I'll sort my thoughts out and write a few keywords and things like that to kind of keep myself on the right track. But this one I kind of wrote almost an essay for, kind of a small essay for. So let's go ahead and get into this one. I'm going to skip the trivia on this one, and I'm going to skip a lot of the just regular talking on this one, because I want to focus more on the idea of the episode rather than just I don't want the idea of the episode to kind of get muddied up with a couple of things. However, there is one thing I do want to mention, which is yesterday, the 23rd of July, was my birthday. I had a great day. Had a wonderful day. Had a wonderful breakfast at a cafe. I went to the park and rode bicycles in the park. I rode a bicycle in the park. I didn't ride two. And then after that, had some delivery food. I watched Mad Max Fury Road. Great movie, by the way. Maybe one day I'll do like a movie review or ranking episode or something like that. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen Mad Max Fury Road, go ahead and watch it. It is a fantastic movie, I would say. And now this probably sounds like a big claim. I would say it's one of the best action movies of all time. If you've seen it, I'm going to assume you probably agree with me. If I were to say top 10, I think you'd probably agree with me. Anyways, let's go ahead and get into this episode because, as I said, it's an opinion piece and it's something I've been thinking about a lot. Something that I feel like, sometimes there's topics in your life where you feel like you come across a topic where you feel like I could write a book about that. You feel like, this isn't just a topic I want to discuss. This is something I would actually feel like I could write an entire book on. So we're going to go ahead and get into that one today. Now, I'll put it as the episode title. So, if you're listening to this, you already know what the topic is. But, for example, if you're just kind of shuffling through podcast, well, the episode is about... Well, it's an opinion piece about why I think schools should be formatted in a 4-day week rather than a 5-day week. So let's go ahead and get into the episode. I hope you're ready for this. If you have any different opinions on this, feel free to message me and talk about it. I'm happy to discuss it. As I said, it's something I really enjoy thinking about and talking about. So if you have some thoughts on it, please let me know. I would love to hear them. So let's go ahead and get into this episode. I think a lot of people think that when you say that you want a 4-day week at school, they think as a student that you're just being lazy. And I think the same thing they think as a teacher as well. They think that you just want to, not teach as much and you want to get the same salary for the same amount of time. But the argument that I'm going to be making today is that we're not using our time efficiently. And so let me get into what that means. And I'm going to start off with how I mean that in the perspective of a student. So I'm going to start with my opinion. I'm going to be reflecting on my time as a student and how I felt the 5-day week was hindering me from actually learning better. And I feel like it's hindering most people from learning better. Now, you can make the argument that some people do benefit from the 5-day week, and I believe that to be correct for many people. However, you'll hear in my argument why that's still available, why that's still possible for those who prefer to study more often rather than kind of condensing it down into more efficient study time. So let's get into this as a student first. So the biggest thing I think as a student is that it feels very overwhelming. Now, this cycle of 5 days on, 2 days off can be, well, as a student, as a teacher, very overwhelming, as I said earlier, because you don't really get time to relax from these things. You are always just doing stuff, and you don't really understand what you're doing, and I feel like that could lead to a bit of frustration. However, I think the biggest problem with the overwhelming feeling of this, with this cycle stuff, is that you don't really get to focus on stuff. You don't really get to learn stuff, because basically by the time that you've finished remembering the thing that you needed for the test, it's already time to move on to the next thing. And not only that, but like, well, at least in my school, we had 7 different subjects. And like, how can you expect a teenager or a person to remember all of that stuff in a reasonable way? When you go through school and you have to just constantly remember stuff for a test that's coming in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever the next week, you don't learn stuff. You just remember stuff. And that's where I think we're failing students, in making them study 5 days a week every single week, because it's a lot. And I think it's causing them harm. I think it's not causing any good for people, because you're never learning stuff. I mean, you are learning stuff, but I mean, if you ask someone, let's say you go to a random person on the street, every single person learned the Pythagorean theorem in algebra class or whatever math class that you learned it in. But I feel like if you went on the street and you asked people, what's the Pythagorean theorem? I think most people would kind of flounder their way through something about A's and B's and squares and stuff like that, and they wouldn't actually remember. And then if you say, okay, maybe you remember A squared plus B squared equals C squared. What does that mean? I feel like a lot of people would still just be like, I don't know. Now, you might say, of course, what's the Pythagorean theorem really used for in real life? It's just an example, right? And I think it's a good example, because it's something that, 1, is very basic, and 2, is quite simple to remember. And a lot of people won't remember it. Why is that? Because they didn't actually learn it. They spent all of their time learning the Pythagorean theorem to be able to do stuff in math class, but they didn't really get how they could use that. Now, you might be thinking, well, why would I need it? Well, let's say, woodworking or something like that. You want to cut some wood, right? You want to be able to have like a nice little triangle cut out. How long do I need to make my hypotenuse? Well, Pythagorean theorem, right? It's just in there. Now, obviously, my focus is usually on language learning, because I'm a language teacher. But I think I'm not. I don't want to argue this from the point of a language teacher, because I feel like it's not about me. It's about the community in general. It's about the whole educational sphere and how to use the time better. Because I feel like in education now, there's a lot of wasted time. And that's not the teacher's fault, and it's not the student's fault. It's the fault of standardization of the day, in the sense that, like, it's like if you have an hour and a half every single day, but the lesson plan tells you to do just a standard, you need to do these pages to these pages. But, for example, let's say, like, your students just get it. They just do it fast, and you can learn it, right? So, like, what do you have to do? You just kind of have to come up with stuff. And there's a lot to it, but I'm not really going to go into that today. I want to stick mostly to the 4-day week. I mean, I'm trying not to get too opinionated about this and go into too many tangents, because, I don't want to ruin the topic of the episode. But it is, like, going back to the original argument that I was making, is that it is overwhelming. Because you have to spend so much time just simply remembering things. You have to spend so much time writing things down and just getting it ready for the test and putting it into your brain and expelling it as soon as it's done. Because if you try to remember that stuff, it's not that you can't remember it. It's that it almost feels like you must get rid of it out of your brain. You must forget it after the test, because, well, if I'm sitting here thinking about, let's say how to, derive an integral or something like that, and my next thing is coming up that's not about that, it almost feels like I have wasted information in my head, and I just don't have room in my head to remember that stuff. Same thing, like I try to teach my language classes in a way that isn't like that. I try to make sure everybody understands why they're learning this now and where they'll need it in the future, and not to give them too much so as to make it feel like they have wasted information in their head. A lot of language teachers, I'm not calling language teachers out, but I feel like a lot of language teachers, they don't really teach the future aspect. Well, they teach the future aspect, but that was bad. They don't teach the future idea of why someone might need this in the future and where they can go with it. Because, well, let's be honest, a lot of students aren't going to have a future with the language. And not in the sense that they're not going to be able to learn it. I just mean that they're going to do the bare minimum that they need to be able to pass whatever tests that they need to do. And then they're going to be done. And I feel like a lot of teachers teach to that. And I don't mean just language teachers. I mean in general. I think a lot of teachers teach the idea that people are just learning for the test. and then they're done. So you might be thinking, where are you going with all of this stuff? Well, that's why I think the 4-day week is better, because you can use your time more efficiently, and you can actually, teach the stuff, and you can teach the material, and people have longer to sit on it over the weekend. Because if they have more time over the weekend, they're not constantly feeling like, okay, I've done with Friday stuff, now I got to cram it out of my brain, work on the stuff for the weekend, come back on Monday and start whatever new stuff we're going to be doing. And that's just kind of wasted material there. I don't think that's the way to do it. I think we're wasting a lot of time by, we have this weird, I don't know, paradox, paradigm, whatever you want to call it, where students are simultaneously having to learn too much while also having too much wasted time. And I feel like we can trim that down to more efficient material in a more efficient time while allowing students to spend their time on the weekends doing other things. Now, that's also another idea that I have about the 4-day week. Why do we want not the 4-day week, but let's think about it as the 3-day weekend? The 3-day weekend would allow students to spend more time socializing with their friends and their family and doing things with them. As we all know, maybe you've read it before, there are plenty of articles online talking about the benefits of socialization for students. That's a big push behind the less homework these days. A lot of schools are going for, less time spent on doing homework so students can spend more time with their family and friends and things like that. And I know, of course, a lot of my memories as a child and a lot of the times where I learned stuff, and not educational stuff, but just being a human, was spending time with my friends and doing things. And it was very valuable to my growth as a human. Now, I may have been kind of an annoying person when I was a kid. And obviously, all those times as a kid where you feel like you're a very annoying person, you try to flush those out as an adult and kind of wish you'd never done that and hope to be a better person, but that's not about that. There's a lot of valuable time spent socializing as a kid that I feel like would lead to, just a better society, I feel like. Because if people are always spending all of their time at school and all of their time working on whatever science fair project they have, they don't actually have the time to just be a better human. And I feel like nowadays, more important than ever, I feel like people are just wanting to distance themselves away from people they don't like and kind of stick to people that they do like, rather than being able to have that kind of full social understanding of being able to associate with everybody. And I feel like having 3-day weekends, of course, I don't want to say it's going to lead to world peace, but I think it would help. I think it would be better than what we have now. I feel like the system we have now is failing students on every front. Now, it would also allow students to be able to spend more time doing their own things. Let's say they don't want to hang out with their friends and they want to play World of Warcraft, or they want to paint pictures, or they want to read books. They would have more time for that. Because as of right now, if you only have 2 days over the weekend, let's say you have to wake up at 6 every morning to go to school. Well, on Saturday, teenagers aren't waking up at 6. They're going to wake up at 10 or 11 or 12. And then they're going to slowly get up out of bed. They're going to go, I don't know, drink a Monster energy drink or something like that, and they're going to go hang out with their friends for a little bit. Or let's say they're not unable to. Let's say their parents say, hey, we got to go to grandma's house and we're going to be pulling weeds out of the garden because, well, we need to go help grandma today. Okay, fine, let's go do that. However, now I don't have my Saturday to spend with my friends. Well, maybe tomorrow. Well, no, Sunday. I have to work on my science fair project. I have homework to do. I've got 5 hours of homework to do because, well, that's what the teacher said I needed to do. It doesn't help. It doesn't help. You're just wasting a lot of time. There's a lot of wasted time in there. It comes, that old school style of teaching where just more is more and more is better, but that's not true, as we found out. More is not better. More is harder, and that's it. A lot of people equate difficulty to better teaching, but that's not it. That's not true. Better teaching is just better teaching, better use of your time. And I feel like if students were able to feel like they have more control over the time and they don't have to trade, doing homework to hanging out with friends, because a lot of the times I would imagine if students had 3-day weekends, a lot of those students who don't bring their homework would start being able to bring their homework, because what happens is they probably just wanted to hang out with their friends because they never get to see their friends. They've got their friends down the block where they go skateboarding or they go, hang out and play video games together, and they don't really get to see them. And instead, they all neglect to do their homework to hang out with each other. But if they had more time together, they would be able to hang out and do their homework later. So I think it would just be beneficial in general. Now, there's the whole case for the 4-day work week as well, and I agree with that. I feel like everything should shift to 4-3 instead of 5-2, but that's not a topic for today. Okay, so I want to focus on now my opinion as a teacher. Now, hopefully this doesn't get a bit long-winded. I don't think it will. I'm going to try to keep this nice and concise. And weirdly enough, this episode has a lot written about it, but I feel like it's going to be a shorter episode because, well, efficient use of time, really. So, anyways, a lot of the same points that are made for students can be made for teachers as well. Because, believe it or not, your teacher is a human being with family and friends and hobbies and interests and things like that. And things to do. Maybe even more so than a student. There's a lot of stuff. Like, as a teacher, I can tell you that and there's a lot of teachers in my family. Like, my mom teaches and my grandma taught, and I think pretty much anybody who's a teacher will tell you that you're not as, I don't want to say you're not as good of a teacher in April as you are in October, but kind of, because it's the same thing. It's just a constant cycle of grinding throughout the year. And by the time you get to April, you are just worn out. You don't really have that motivation that you did in the beginning of the year. Of course, summer vacation is where you're allowed to bring that all back, and you're able to, recuperate and stuff like that. But do we really want to live that way? Do we really want to have that cycle as a teacher where you know that your teacher's just worn out and exhausted and tired in May, the time where you're going to be taking tests, the important end of the year, and your teacher's tired and just doesn't want to do things anymore because they're just, I've just had to deal with parents, I've had to deal with students and tests and grades all year. April comes around, tests are going to be in 2 months. Just open your books and get to work. No, obviously I would never do that, but I'm sure many teachers would because they're tired, and you can't, and like, thankfully I have a pretty good balance of work and social life, and I have a pretty good home life as well, but that's not the case for everyone. Some teachers, when they go home, it just gets harder for them. They have a hard home life, or they got some sort of stuff going on where, by the time Monday comes around, they're still just as stressed as they were on Friday. And by the time they get to April, they're just kind of out of energy, like probably even January. By the time they get back from Christmas, they're just like, can't wait for summer, and that's not how you want your teachers to be. You want your teachers to be motivated and excited to be there every single day. Well, yeah, obviously that's not possible to do, but I feel like having 3 days off would benefit that in the same way, because teachers would be able to spend more time with their families and more time with their friends and things like that. And they would, let's say there is a big grading session they need to do. They don't have to cram it in all on Sunday night, because Saturday night you need to go over to your parents' house to have a dinner, or you need to, take your kid to soccer practice, or there's something going on. And, on Saturdays as a student, you'd spend it playing video games, or let's say you have a soccer tournament. Your parents are the one who takes you there. Now, obviously, they want to be there and they want to see you, but, that is time that they could be using on something of their own that they want to do. And they have to sacrifice all of that time. They have to sacrifice that weekend to do that stuff. And I feel like the same way with working for 3 in terms of, the job sphere, I feel like it would benefit teachers the same way it would benefit students. It would let you feel like I have time to breathe. I have time to relax. I have time to recuperate, and I have time to just kind of get my thoughts back together, so on Monday I'm good. Now obviously, as I said before, not everybody has a great home life. Not everybody has an ideal situation over the weekend in which they can recuperate, but I feel like the overall benefit would be generally positive, and I think many people would back me up on that. And I also feel like it would just it would allow for just a better mental health of teachers, because I think that's the biggest problem with teachers is that there's just so much mental, I don't want to say slog, but we'll call it mental slog, in the sense that you just feel like you're just tired of it, and it's like in the beginning, I always say, it's always funny when you get a new teacher in, because they have so much ambition, they have so much they want to do, and then it's like older teachers just don't have that ambition. Why? It's because, well, it's not because they don't want to anymore. I'm sure they do. If they had more time to relax, I'm sure they would still do that stuff. But the problem is that, like, you just kind of get beaten down over the years. It's just like by the time you hit your 5th year, you're just like, well, maybe I'll just cool it this year. I'll do a little bit less this year, because, like, well, I tried last year. I tried to do that cool Christmas lesson last year, but, my students just didn't really take to it. And, 2 years ago, they just didn't take to it as well. It's like, maybe I'll just do a little bit less this year, because why should I spend more time if nobody's really going to appreciate it? And, you get to the end of the year and you're just kind of tired, and over the years it just builds up. And, I feel like students would be happier, teachers would be happier, parents would be happier if we were just doing more in less time. Spending our 4 days a week, working through our education. Because also, now I want to kind of get to the general idea of this. Also, because I feel like if we're spending 4 days a week rather than 5 days a week, I feel like there's more of a pressure to actually get stuff done. Because if you know that you've got one less day a week to actually be at school, you're going to think, well, I should focus while I'm here because I'm here. And I we've only got 4 days a week. Those other 3 days I'm going to be at home. And I feel like, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I would want to focus more because I feel like, we're only here for 4 days a week. It's less time. And therefore, I should put myself just kind of more into it. And, well, it's not to kind of encourage laziness. It's to encourage the self-motivation of the student, in my opinion. Now, this is not something that's going to change overnight. This will take years and years, in the same way it took, for probably a while once we went from 6-day working weeks to 5-day working weeks. It's going to take a while, but as I said, it's not to encourage laziness, it's to encourage self-motivation from students, because now a lot of students don't have that self-motivation, and that's where, it's a complicated issue. It's not going to work immediately effectively for everyone, but as I said before, I think this will have a general positive effect over most people. And the self-motivation part is where I think it will be better for students, because I feel like it'll allow for not only more knowledgeable students, but also kind of more dynamic students. Because I feel like if students are able to spend most of their week learning what they want to do, because you have your 4 days a week where you're learning your subject, but you also have the weekend where you're learning to do what you want. You're learning how to socialize. You're learning how to, let's say, you're painting or practice your painting, or your music, or reading or writing, whatever it is that you do over the weekend, you're getting better at it because you get to spend more time with it. And I feel like, I keep saying I feel like, but I mean, it is an opinion piece. It allows for students to just have more control over their life. And I think that'll lead to happier students because, well, I mean, just like I've noticed that if I give students more control, then I would say 80% of them take that control eventually. Some of them don't. Some of them don't like the idea of not having control. But many of them do. Many of them take to it. Many of them will, if I, let's say, give them an open-ended amount of words to write something, I will say, and this is work, it takes time. New students kind of struggle with it a little bit, but my continuing students don't. They understand it and they do a really good job in this. And that's that I will say, I want you to write about the pros and cons of, whatever it is. For example, let's say opening a restaurant in the city center versus opening a restaurant in the suburbs. And they'll say, how many words should we do? How many sentences? How many paragraphs? I will say, I am not going to give you a limit. I want you to write what you think is a good amount of words for that. Because that's how it works kind of, when you write stuff in real life, is that, when you write a novel, your publisher doesn't come to you and say, your novel needs to be 50,000 words, and it's due by Friday. That's just not how it works. You write the novel and you use your words as you see fit. Same thing with my students. I tell them, as I said, like, I want you to give me what you think will be a good amount of words to do it. And unsurprisingly, a lot of the students' essays will come back relatively the same length. Because I don't want to say there's like a natural amount to do it in, but they kind of take that control. And they kind of use their words efficiently. And it comes out to a pretty good length. And when I read them, I don't feel like I read a lot of, extraneous words. I don't feel like I read a lot of fluff in there. And I think that'll be the same way with students. If they have that more self-control over their life, a lot of the fluff will get taken out because a lot of it's just killing time. As a student, I always felt like on Sundays, I was just terrified to start my homework because, well, I want to do stuff. I want to do stuff. I don't want to sit there doing my homework, but soon it's going to be the weekend or soon it's going to be Monday. How am I going to do this stuff, And I feel like cutting out all that extra, time will lead to students kind of having more control over their life, more like just happier students in general, and just less pressure. And I think we should really take the pressure off the students and off the teachers because education is so important. An educated society is going to be better. I think we've seen over the years that the uneducated can get a lot of people on board. And that's what we want to avoid in the future, because people will ask, why do we study chemistry? Well, because then you'll understand how vaccines work and then you won't be scared of vaccines, and you'll understand what's good for you and you don't have to be scared of it, I always just say, just being knowledgeable and being informed about things and knowing things, it'll make life easier. And I feel like if we condense this 5-day week down to a 4-day week, we'll be able to use our time more efficiently and we'll be able to just be happier in general. All right. So I don't want to go on for too long. I hope you kind of enjoyed it. I hope it was a bit of a different piece to me. And now it may seem a bit rough at some points. This is my first time doing a real serious opinion piece. I was considering doing this as a blog. I was considering writing this. Maybe that'll be something I do in the future with more serious pieces. I'll write them instead of speaking about them. Because, well, I mean, obviously it takes a bit more planning with your words to be able to come up with these big opinion pieces. But maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't, I don't know. But if you did like it, of course, share it with your friends, give it a like, give it another listen, or leave a comment. If you're listening to this on YouTube, please leave a comment because I want to know what you think about this. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'll be happy to read them and I'll try to reply to everyone I can. So, anyways, thank you so much for listening. I had a good time, a struggle doing this one. I probably recorded it 3 times and erased it 3 times. But I in general, I felt like a good weight was lifted off my shoulders having finished this. I want to do more things like this in the future. I may write them. I may write and say them. Maybe I'll write a big piece and then I'll give a condensed version or a more just thinking about it type of version as a podcast. So anyways, again, for the 3rd time, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful year, week, whatever you're doing. If this is the only one you listen to, I hope you have a wonderful life. I'm going to go for a run now. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.